Even the most meticulously planned operations can quickly spiral into a test of adaptability and sheer will. On the 17th of March 2026, the roar of rotors was already loud enough to rouse the garrison as the first Osprey crossed the seawall. 6MV 22S approached at 61 meters, spread across a 400-meter front, flying so low that the lead aircraft's downdraft kicked spray off the water's surface before clearing the outer perimeter of Larak Island. This Iranian communications facility had been jamming coalition navigation frequencies for 11 days. Now, at 5:02 a.m., the compound's floodlights blazed to life, illuminating antenna arrays and hardened switching rooms. Colonel Dariush Nazari, awake for 2 hours, watched as his defenders reached their positions even before the first Osprey breached the outer wall. There was no scramble. They were already there, weapons at the ready. This unhurried readiness reflected a garrison commander who had spent the previous Tuesday repositioning every firing post, anticipating the exact requirements of a vertical assault. The northwestern rooftop emplacement opened fire from 500 meters with a heavy weapon. Without a word, the lead pilot immediately broke right, executing a sharp banking maneuver that dropped the aircraft 9 meters, compressing every Marine inside against their harnesses. The Osprey leveled out 90 meters east of its intended approach path, maintaining speed and still bearing towards the island. Above the formation, the lead AH-1Z Viper located the northwestern emplacement in 2 seconds, silencing it with a 20-millimeter burst. The helicopter swung north before the Echo crossed the water, already hunting for its next target. At 5:04 a.m., Gunnery Sergeant Elena Reyes hit the fast rope, descending 5 meters in 4 seconds. The rooftop met her boots hard, and she was moving, weapon up and scanning, before fully absorbing the impact, immediately taking cover behind the nearest antenna housing. Within the next 8 seconds, 4 more Marines landed within 9 meters. No commands were needed. They had rehearsed this 40 times, but this 40th felt like the first one that truly mattered. From the main building's second floor, 3 windows opened simultaneously. The Vipers made another pass, lower this time, nose down, their cannon walking a line across the building's eastern face, persuading every window to close. Reyes used these 3 seconds of suppression to push her team towards the rooftop access door, steel reinforced and locked from inside. Behind it, the sound of boots on metal stairs confirmed a position being reinforced. Voices in Farsi gave instructions, but Reyes didn't need to understand the words to grasp the situation. First Sergeant Luis Mendez's element reached the outer wall's eastern section at 5:06 a.m. 4 Marines fast roped in, forming the secondary breach team. Their assignment was the service entrance on the building's southern face. Mendez moved along the wall's inner edge, keeping the main structure between his team and the second-floor windows, reading the compound's geometry exactly as the rehearsal photographs had taught him. Behind both assault elements, 2 CH-53E Super Stallions approached from the north, carrying the heavy element, 31 Marines, breaching equipment for hardened doors, and the gear needed to open what the fast rope teams could not. At 5:07 a.m., 6 drones lifted from camouflage positions on the island's eastern shore. These were not military-grade, but GPS-guided commercial frames modified for payload. Exactly the kind of asymmetric countermeasure that costs $50,000 to field against aircraft worth $30 million. They climbed fast, oriented on the inbound Super Stallions, and accelerated. The Vipers were already turning. 3 drones disintegrated in the first gun burst. A 4th intercepted the second Viper's fire. The 5th broke north and ran into a wall of 20-millimeter rounds that the gunship placed directly in its path. The 6th jinked south, low and fast, threading the gap between the 2 helicopters, finding the trailing CH 53E's tail section before anyone could get a clean intercept angle. The impact was not catastrophic, but it was enough. The Super Stallion yawed hard right, its tail rotor compromised, the aircraft rotating through 40 degrees before the pilot arrested it with collective input and sheer mechanical stubbornness. Partial control, reduced effectiveness. The helicopter was still flying, barely, angrily. The crew worked every system simultaneously, but the assault approach was finished. The pilot pushed north, transmitting status, clearing the island with 31 Marines still aboard and the breaching equipment still in its cases. On the rooftop, Reyes looked at the access door, then at her remaining kit. Standard breaching charges, enough for one attempt. Nazari's voice reached his inner ring defenders at 5:09 a.m. 4 sentences, specific and unhurried, directing his remaining 28 soldiers into the hardened communications building. Secondary positions were abandoned. The perimeter pulled inward. Everything concentrated around the switching room in the basement, the one room that could not be taken without equipment, currently flying north on a damaged helicopter. He was not calm because the situation was under control. He was calm because he had already identified the one variable that made the situation survivable. Reyes set the charge on the rooftop door. The door went inward at 5:11 a.m., not cleanly. The frame warped rather than releasing, the charge burning through the lock mechanism but leaving the hinges intact, causing the steel panel to fold rather than fall. Reyes went through the gap low and fast, Ochoa behind her, the team stacking into the stairwell, landing before the smoke cleared the doorframe. 2 flights down, the main corridor ran east-west through the building's spine. Fluorescent lights, tiled floor, and at the corridor's far end, close enough to hear individual voices, Nazari's inner ring soldiers held the passage to the switching room. Neither side moved. The corridor was 18 meters of open tile, with equipment racks on both sides and nothing in between that could stop a bullet. Whoever moved first would lose. The Marines knew it. The defenders knew it. For 40 seconds, both sides held their positions, contemplating the same geometry from opposite directions. Mendez solved it from below. His team had reached the service corridor 3 minutes ago, a parallel passage running the building's length 1 floor down, narrower than the main hallway, smelling of electrical equipment and years of accumulated heat. He moved his 4 Marines through it single file, navigating by the hand-drawn map included in the reconnaissance package, which he had memorized in the aircraft. The secondary entrance to the switching room was at the passage's eastern end. Unlocked in the reconnaissance photographs taken 6 weeks ago, it was still unlocked. Mendez held his team at the door and keyed his radio twice the signal Reyes was waiting for. She went north at the same moment he went east. The defenders, positioned to hold the corridor approach, now faced a problem their positioning could not solve. 2 points of entry into the same room simultaneously. They made the only rational choice, which was to fall back into the switching room itself and seal the interior door. A steel panel hydraulically locked the kind of door that required the equipment currently aboard a damaged helicopter 8 kilometers north. 8 soldiers with Nazari's voice on their radio were ordered. Hold the room. The door locked at 5:18 a.m. Reyes stood outside it, looking through the reinforced window at everything. The mission targeted the antenna switching arrays, the jamming transmitters. 11 days of interference with coalition navigation, all concentrated in a room she couldn't see and could not enter. She tried the secondary breach kit, but it was insufficient. The hydraulic door had not been in the rehearsal package because that package was built on 6-week-old reconnaissance. She called it up, requesting options. Corporal James Ochoa didn't wait for the answer. He was already moving toward the antenna field outside the building, across the compound, to the transmission hardware that fed the switching room's output into the air. Physical cables, 4 of them, running in conduit along the antenna base. He cut the first one at 5:19 a.m. with bolt cutters from his kit. Then the second. The jamming signal didn't fade. It stopped, mid-transmission, like a voice silenced by a hand over a mouth. Coalition navigation frequencies came back online in sequence. The corridor the mission was designed to reopen was now open. Mendez crouched outside the locked door. Inside, he could hear the shift in Nazari's voice, not panic, but something recalibrating. The colonel understood what the silence in his equipment meant. He transmitted his position and status to Revolutionary Guard Naval Command. 8 personnel, hardened room, supplies for 72 hours. Coordinates precise. His voice carried no urgency because urgency was not what the transmission required. What it required was accuracy. The Vipers picked up surface contacts at 5:26 a.m. 5 fast attack craft emerging from the northeast, spread wide, their approach geometry covering every side of the island simultaneously. Not a relief force, but a siege force. The difference mattered. A relief force would try to reach Naseri, putting it in range of the Vipers. A siege force would simply surround the island and wait for the Vipers to run out of fuel. The lead gunship checked its fuel state. 24 minutes of loiter time. The replacement section from the main force was 20 minutes out. 4 minutes of uncovered airspace. The attack craft knew the number. Someone on one of those vessels had been tracking the Viper's patrol pattern, calculating their consumption rate, and the approach timing was not a coincidence. At 5:28 a.m., the damaged CH-53E called in from 8 kilometers north. The pilot's voice was steady, tail rotor partial, directional control reduced but stable. He could hold altitude but could not execute an assault approach. What he could do, what his crew chief was already rigging, was a static hover 5 meters above the island's northern shore, low enough that 31 Marines and their equipment could drop to the rocks below without fast ropes. It would take 8 minutes to reach position. The math was suddenly different. The CH-53E arrived at 5:31 a.m., its damaged tail rotor audible from the southern wall, an irregular harmonic beneath the normal rotor noise, the sound of machinery working past its design parameters on nothing but crew determination. It came in from the north at 12 meters, slower than it should be, the pilot holding the hover with inputs so constantly precise they looked effortless from below. They were not effortless. The first Marines dropped from the starboard door at 5:32 a.m. a 1.5-meter drop onto the island's northern rock shelf, absorbing the landing and moving immediately to clear the landing zone for the next man. Ochoa's team on the northern wall provided cover. The heavy element came out in pairs, 2, then 2, then 2. The breaching equipment was handed down in cases the hydraulic door kit that the mission had needed 40 minutes ago was now finally on the island's surface. 19 Marines were down when the lead attack craft reached the eastern shelf. The vessel didn't stop at the water's edge. It ran its bow directly onto the rock shelf, grinding hull against stone. The boarding element came over the rail before the scraping stopped. 8 figures in assault gear moving fast toward the outer wall's eastern face. The deck gun traversed toward the CH-53E above the northern shore. The second Viper, fuel state critical, made its final pass. One burst, and the deck gun position went quiet. The helicopter peeled away northeast, transmitting its bingo state done for this engagement. The replacement section from the main force was now 11 minutes out. The island's airspace belonged to whoever was patient enough to wait 11 minutes. The boarding element reached the outer wall. Reyes pulled her northern face Marines south to cover the breach point, leaving the antenna field held by Ochoa's team alone. It was the only move available. She could not cover both simultaneously with what she had. Ochoa understood what the redeployment meant without being told. His 4 Marines tightened their perimeter around the cut cables and held. Inside the building, Mendez heard the activity outside and made a calculation. The hydraulic breaching kit was assembled. It would open the switching room door in 90 seconds of operation. What it could not do was operate quietly. The pump was loud, directional, and would tell everyone inside the room exactly what was happening to their door for 90 seconds before it opened. He looked at the kit, looked at the door, thought about the 8 soldiers on the other side, and the decision they would face when the pump started. He started the pump. Inside the switching room, Nazari heard it immediately. For the first time in this operation, his voice on the radio changed, not panic, but the compressed urgency of a man revising his timeline. He had been describing a siege. The pump outside his door was describing something else. He transmitted a single update to the attack craft outside. Accelerate. CENTCOM released its statement at 5:36 a.m. The 22nd MEU had disabled Iranian communications infrastructure at the Strait of Hormuz. Operations were ongoing. The jamming had been down for 17 minutes. The coalition navigation corridors functioned commercially, operationally, strategically. The mission's stated objective was complete. On the island, the breaching pump had 60 seconds remaining. The boarding element outside the eastern wall had found the low point, a section where bomb damage from a previous engagement left the stonework uneven, climbable, 0, 9 meters shorter than the surrounding structure. 2 figures were already scaling it. A third provided covering fire from the shelf below. The replacement Viper section was 8 minutes out. Mendez watched the hydraulic gauge climb toward operating pressure and did not think about 8 minutes or 60 seconds or the attack craft on the eastern wall. He thought about the door in front of him, the room behind it, and the single question that the pump's countdown was turning from tactical to immediate. When this door opens, what happens next is not decided by anyone's plan. It's decided by 8 people in a room who have been listening to machinery dismantle their last position for the past 30 seconds. The pump reached pressure. Outside, the main force cut its searchlights on at maximum range. Visible from the island's southern wall, a gray hull pushing a white bow wave, still distant but no longer abstract. The attack craft on the eastern shelf saw it, too. The vessel that had run its bow onto the rock shelf began reversing, hull scraping back off the stone, its boarding element pausing mid-climb. Naseri's voice came through the door, not through the radio, but through the door itself, directed at Mendez's side, at the Marines outside. 3 sentences in careful English that he had been constructing for the last 2 minutes while the pump ran. The hydraulic gauge touched operating pressure. The door did not open.